We're going to start off with a story called The Thing. There were two young boys named Trevor and Will. They spent most of their summer vacation hanging around town looking for things to do. Well, one hot August night, the boys were sitting by a fence by the main road. There was a cornfield just across the way. Suddenly, Trevor spotted something in the field. In the darkness, it was difficult to make out, but he thought it looked like some kind of weird animal. He nudged his friend and pointed in the direction of the strange-looking figure. Will said he could see it too, but he wasn't sure. He seemed to think that the mysterious thing was vaguely human. Well, the next thing they knew, the thing was gone. The boys craned their necks and scanned the field with their eyes. Then out of the blackness came the thing. It slowly walked over the edge of the field before disappearing again. Trevor and Will looked at each other, puzzled. "What was that?" asked Will. "I have no idea," replied Trevor. No sooner had they said that than Trevor felt a clammy hand on his shoulder. He turned around and found himself staring directly into the hideous face of the thing. He let out a yell of terror and surprise. The rotting skin on the thing's face was coming off in pieces, revealing the bone underneath. For a moment, it just stared silently at Trevor with its dark, sunken eyes. Then it suddenly grabbed a hold of his arm. Trevor felt its fingernails digging into his flesh as he wriggled out of its grasp. The two boys leaped off the fence and ran down the road, screaming in horror. They didn't stop running until they reached their homes. They tried to tell their parents and friends about the thing they seen that night, but nobody seemed to believe them. When Trevor woke up the next morning, the scratches on his arms were still there. After a few days, they got worse and worse. Trevor got sick, and his parents took him to see a doctor. After examining his arm, the doctor told the boy it was infected and gave him a few pills to take. Unfortunately, Trevor's condition got worse and worse. The infection spread into his entire arm, and it wasn't long before his flesh was rotting and falling off. He was taken to hospital, but no matter what the doctor did, no treatment seemed to work. The infection spread throughout his whole body. Trevor was confined to bed and started to waste away. It seemed like he was beyond help, and as the days went by, he steadily grew worse and worse. His anguished parents could only sit by his bedside and cry as they watched their beloved son slowly rotting away before their eyes. On the day that Trevor finally passed away, Will came to the hospital to visit him. When the boy walked into the hospital room and saw Trevor lying on the bed, he was horrified. His friend looked exactly like the thing. This story is called The Big Toe. One day, a boy was digging in his garden when he saw a big toe sticking out of the ground. He tried to pick it up, but it was stuck. It wouldn't budge. So he pulled as hard as he could, and it came off in his hand. Then he heard something groan and scamper away. The boy took the big toe into the kitchen and showed his mom. "That looks like a nice piece of meat," she said. "I'll put it in the soup and we'll have it for dinner." That night at the dinner table, the boy's father scooped the big toe out of the soup and chopped it up into 3 pieces. The father, the mother, and the boy each ate a piece. Then they did the dishes, and when it got dark, they went to bed. The boy fell asleep almost at once, but in the middle of the night, he was rudely awakened by a strange sound. He listened closely. It sounded like there was voices coming from outside his window, and it was calling to him. "Where's my big toe?" it groaned. When the boy heard that, he got very scared, but he thought, "It doesn't know where I am. It'll never find me." Then he heard the voice once more, only now it was closer. "Where's my big toe?" it groaned. The boy pulled the blankets over his head and closed his eyes. "I'll go to sleep," he thought. "When I wake up, it'll be gone." But soon he heard the back door open, and again he heard the voice. "Where's my big toe?" it groaned. Then the boy heard footsteps move through the kitchen, into the dining room, into the living room, and into the front hall. They slowly climbed the stairs. Closer and closer they came. Soon they were in the upstairs hall. Now they were right outside his door. "Where's my big toe?" the voice called. The boy watched in horror as his bedroom door opened. Shaking with fear, he threw his bed sheets over his head and listened as the footsteps slowly moved through the dark towards his bed. Then they stopped. "Where's my big toe?" the voice whispered. "You've got it!" Next, we're going to read a story called Cold as Clay. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared more than anything on earth. She fell in love with a farmhand named Jim, but the farmer did not think that Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the county. Soon after she left, Jim got sick. He wasted away and he died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death, he could not tell his daughter what had happened. She continued to think about Jim and the life that they might have together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. When the girl opened the door, Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to come get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed a few things and they left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon, Jim complained of a headache. "Oh, it aches something terrible," he told her. She put her hands on his forehead. "Why, you're as cold as clay," she said. "I hope you're not ill." So she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on her father's door. He was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't send for you," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone, and so was the horse. So they went inside the stable to look for them. The horse was there. It was covered with sweat and trembling with fear, but there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then they quickly went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open the grave. The corpse was in the coffin, but around its head they found the girl's handkerchief. This one's called Room for One More. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with friends in a big house they owned outside the city. That night, they had a good time visiting, but when Blackwell went to bed, he tossed and turned and had a hard time falling asleep. Sometime during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. He went to the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long black hearse filled with people. The driver of the hearse looked up to him. When Blackwell saw his queer, hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him, "There's room for one more." Then he waited for a minute or two and drove off. In the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. "Oh, I'm sure you were dreaming," they said. "Yeah, I must have been, but it didn't seem like a dream." After breakfast, he went into Philadelphia. He spent the day high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to take him back down to the street. But when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out and called to him, "There's room for one more." It was the driver of the hearse. No thanks," said Blackwell. "I'll take the next one." The door closed and the elevator started down. There was a shriek and screaming. Then the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone on board was killed. This one is called The Guests. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start, and now it was getting dark. So they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go in the morning. Just off the road they saw a small house in the woods. "Maybe they rent rooms," his wife said, so they stopped to ask. An elderly man and a woman came to the door. "They didn't rent rooms," they said, "but we'd be glad to have you stay overnight as our guests. We have plenty of room, and we'd enjoy the company." The old woman made coffee and brought them some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. Then the young couple were taken to their room. They again explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said they would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their host had awakened. On a table near the front door they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. Then they went to the next town. They stopped in a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. "Well, that can't be," he said. "That house burned to the ground, and the man and the woman that lived there died in the fire." The young couple couldn't believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house. All they found was a burnt-out shell. They stood, staring at the ruins, trying to understand what happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble, there was a badly burned table, like the one they had seen by the front door. Only on the table was the envelope that they had left that morning.